Hi there, welcome back. Next, we're going to jump into chapter 13, which is Trends in Partisanship. So, the main theme in this chapter is that basically accepting the United States, partisanship or political affiliation or party affiliation, whatever you want to call it, has been in the decline in Western democracies. And Bartels, they present some evidence that the United States is basically the only exception to this rule. Basically, all of Europe, partisan affiliation is in decline. So, why are we seeing what they call partisan de-alignment, right? They first jump into the explanation they give two explanations for why partisan de-alignment is occurring, especially in Europe. The first is the social change explanation. So this is tied into some of the research that we talked about earlier in the semester about Engelhardt. So this is the idea that they call it the quote cognitive mobilization theory. The idea that education and sort of the spread of wealth in Western democracies has led to individuals being able to sort of think for themselves and to not need political parties to provide information because they can do that on their own, to become sort of more anti-authoritarian against political systems and the political parties thereof. The problem is there's really not any statistical evidence for that theory, right? There's a little bit, but the vast it's really mixed, or even like the opposite explanation, right? Where education, those who are educated, are the most likely to be party affiliated, and the uneducated are becoming detached from political parties. So it's the complete opposite of what the cognitive mobilization theory sort of proffers, right? So the second explanation they suggest is sort of a shift in political parties, right? And how political parties operate and their political platforms. So the idea is that sort of party polarization increases party affiliation. The main idea behind this is that as your political parties distinguish themselves clearly from each other, you're more likely to see some sort of benefit from one party or another being elected, right? And so you're more likely to become sort of affiliated with one party or another. And this is sort of an explanation that fits with the data in Europe. What you're tending to see is sort of party convergence, where a lot of political parties are sort of touting the same political platforms, some of the same policy ideas. There's also the idea that they have to become members of coalitions in the sort of proportional representation systems, so that again reduces your idea as a citizen of who's culpable for bad decisions in the political system. Because, if there are three or four political parties running a political system, who do you blame, right? And so all of these things sort of come together to de-align Europeans from political parties, right? But the exception that we talked about in the United States, we're seeing this sort of vast political polarization occurring since the original sort of studies in the 1960s and 1970s by Converse and others, and Downs, and since those studies, American political parties have become much more polarized, right? Especially in today's times, it's hard to pick a topic where people don't really know what party supports that topic anymore in the United States, and it didn't used to be like that. There was a lot of convergence on policy issues in the past, especially in sort of the 70s and 80s. The main difference would be sort of ideas about the effectiveness of government, and then a lot of racial policies, honestly, that distinguish the political parties. But a lot of their platforms were similar. But today, you know which party is for bigger government. You know, people tend to know these basic facts, at least. Which party is for bigger government, which party supports sort of right to life versus freedom of choice, where parties stand on drug issues and criminality and prisons and just all sorts of stuff, right? And so in the United States, parties have become far more polarized for a couple of reasons. One is because of gerrymandering makes a lot of districts extremely uncompetitive, right? They're they're manipulating their districts to an extent that no political opponent could possibly win a general election. And so this is pushing primary elections to be the only really competitive election in many, many districts in the United States. And also the idea that primary elections are generally only attended by extremists in political parties, and so these sort of two things lead to much greater polarization since the 60s and 70s, and we're definitely seeing it today, where the political parties are becoming less and less powerful, and the actual individuals in the parties are becoming more and more powerful, sort of cult of personality politics, right? So party polarization theory has a lot of statistical evidence, much more than sort of the cognitive mobilization theory we talked about earlier. All right, so we'll move on from that. Let's see. Okay, so the last part of the chapter is focused on sort of what is the consequence of all this, right? What does party de-alignment do to elections and parties and to your sort of political institutions in general, right? So the first effect, and probably the strongest sort of statistical results, are that those who are de-aligned, who are not members of a political party, are much more likely to get their media from some other source than a political party, right? So, from news, from the internet, they're less likely to sort of filter their information through a political lens, right? They're also a lot less likely to vote than those who are politically aligned. They feel less efficacious in the political system. They feel like they don't really do anything or matter in their political system, right? Which is unfortunate. They're more volatile between elections. They're more likely to vote for a different party between two different elections. This can cause some real problems, we're finding out. One is that you get sort of this party fragmentation in your political systems, in PR systems at least. You get a lot more parties when there are a lot of independents in the system and nobody really knows how to judge how they're going to vote. And so you get a lot more parties, and they tend to be extreme parties. And we've seen especially a rise in sort of far right extreme parties in Europe, in Poland, in Germany, in France with Marine Le Pen, the AfD in Germany. These are sort of tangentially tied to Nazis and fascists, and they have sort of Nazist and fascist ideologies, very sort of not just anti-immigrant, but sort of violently anti-immigrant. And so these are some of the side effects of individuals detaching from sort of mainstream political parties And so a lot of political parties will either, you'll see the advent of new political parties, like the ones I talked about that are actually starting to pass the thresholds for representation in their systems. The AfD just won about 15% of the vote in a couple mayorships in Germany, which has really got the German Bundestag concerned, because now you have Nazists in the Bundestag, their House of Representatives, and they don't really know what to do with it. They don't even know if they can sort of. Some are saying we shouldn't even talk about them in public. We definitely shouldn't sort of legislate with them or have them join a coalition of government. So they're obviously going to be pariahs, but they're also like representing significant portions of their society. So it's a real issue, which is pretty new and has yet to be solved. So I'll keep you updated if I can, but it's sort of a much longer term problem. There's also the problem that those who are not politically attached tend to wait till the very last minute to make their political decision. They're far more mercurial, I guess would be a good word for it, when it comes to deciding on a political party or a political vote. And this is giving sort of individual candidates a lot more power in political parties, right? We're seeing, like I was talking about a little earlier, this sort of rise of, populists. What would you call it? The cult of personality, I think, is what I called it earlier. This cult of personality politics, with Donald Trump in the United States and many sort of Republicans, and a couple of Democrats even, like Hakeem Jeffries. You're seeing it in Brazil, right? With Jair Bolsonaro was a big proponent of this. Marine Le Pen is another example from France. Polish politics are completely filled with this. Japanese politics, interestingly enough, are also, there's a lot of like sports stars and baseball players and hyper rich and like influencers in their political system, which is very strange. And so you're seeing a definite rise in this sort of cult of personality because of detachments from political parties themselves, and a much greater willingness to sort of vote for someone, because you're not attached to a political party. I think that's also what's causing a lot of confusion politically, at least in sort of the polls, right? Is that as independents or the non-attached increase, polling becomes far more difficult to do. Donald Trump was not supposed to win 2016, right? Hillary Clinton had him crushed in all the polls, but the polls didn't play out in reality, right? And so you saw sort of the same thing with Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. You saw the rise just this week, actually, of Milei in Argentina, who was this like, complete political outsider who's talking about like destroying their system of government and completely shutting down their sort of central bank and cutting their expenditures by half, and he came from nowhere, and won their presidency. So you're seeing a big rise in this sort of behavior amongst voters. All right, that's all I've got for chapter 12. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you for chapter 13.